Welcome to the Workology podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger of bloggingforjobs.com, for a 45-minute in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, here's your host, Jessica, with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology podcast. It's great to have you on our new podcast as part of the Blogging for Jobs and the Recruiters Lounge blog family. Today's topic is mobile recruiting, specifically how to integrate mobile into your recruiting and hiring strategy. It's something that I think everyone is talking about, and yet only a few recruiters and talent attraction teams have actually implemented a mobile strategy with success. But before we get into high-level mobile recruitment discussions, I want to introduce our guest. Welcome, Carrie, Corbin. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's talk about you and tell me a little bit about Carrie and your background and how did you get into this mobile recruiting business?
So kind of my story is that I'm a reformed HR director, and I kind of fell in love with recruitment marketing and technology and branding after many years doing the traditional HR route. And I've spent the better part of the last 7 years or so kind of honing my craft, first with AT&T and then most recently with Samsung. I happen to be in a very fortunate role with AT&T during the days of the, Singular and AT&T and SBC all coming together. And so I had a great opportunity to be part of a big brand that we were able to kind of start from scratch. We were able to kind of blow it up and start over. So really, just positioned myself to be able to get to really look holistically at a bigger picture strategies, but also look at, okay, what are all the different kind of segments that we can work on. And as we got more involved and innovative with just internet technology and interactive digital, social, naturally the transition happened with mobile as part of that.
So what do you consider mobile recruiting to be? Can you kind of give us an overview of what mobile recruiting is to you?
I can. I think that's a good question. I think there's still a lot of confusion around that. The unfortunate thing is that only about 10% of the Fortune 500 companies have mobile apply ability, but mobile is still bigger than just the ability to apply for a job with a mobile device. But what I don't think a lot of people, I think they realize it in their everyday lives, but they don't necessarily think of it from a work application, is that the experience between a desktop and mobile is becoming one and the same. So right now there's about 2.5 billion users that actively use kind of desktop technology, internet, and yet mobile users, we're talking almost 7 billion. So the amount of people who have smartphones or tablets, definitely way exceeds the people that have desktops. And you need to be cognizant of how do we get in front of those people? How do we recruit the people if they can't see our company information from a device? We really have kind of gotten away from print. Career fairs aren't really a sustainable model. So at the end of the day, how are we advertising and how are we touching those people? And if they're if we're relying on them just going to a desktop and being able to see our information there, then we're doing them and ourselves a disservice. We simply can't not take mobile into consideration. Now we have the Ultrabooks. It's kind of a hybrid between mobile devices and laptops, which I now have and I'm still trying to figure out. But I think really what mobile recruiting is, it's mobile web. So it's your career sites or even just landing pages. It's mobile sourcing. So, mobile text campaigns, reaching out and sending messages directly to people and kind of driving them back somewhere. The ability to have mobile apply, which is still kind of a touchy subject because we all know that applying from a desktop is a fun experience. So, I'm sure we all get really excited when we think of doing it from a mobile, but it is our reality that we have to pay attention to. And then, of course, there's also smartphone apps and how those can be used, in the recruiting process.
I think about what this morning before you and I connected to do this podcast. The first thing I did, even before I got out of bed, was grab my phone and check my work email to see what's going on for the day and look at my calendar. And it's now, I've been up for 2.5, 3 hours, and this very moment, as of about 10 minutes ago, is the first time I actually got in front of a desktop or my laptop computer.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been working theoretically in different intervals while I get my daughter ready to school, and it's all been from my mobile phone. And I don't think that job seekers or other professionals in the corporate world are very different from that.
No, they're not. And it's funny when you look at the stats around mobile recruiting. JobVite actually did a survey recently and talking about where job seekers are accessing their mobile device to look for jobs. And the highest percentage of people, or the one place that was the highest, was in bed before they get out of bed or before they go to bed at night. It was like something like 43%, I think. That's off the top of my head, but
Well, I'll look for the statistics and we'll put them within the blog post over on Blogging for Jobs. So you can just go directly to that to get more information, and we'll get you to the right numbers and information regarding this JobVite survey. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting that I was at the Success Factors Success Connect conference in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, and I heard Travis Triggs talking about Comcast, and he was talking about their mobile experience, which they're still growing and developing. It's still very, very new, but interestingly enough, based on their web traffic data, their busiest mobile traffic days are Monday through Thursday from 10 to 4.
yeah, and that's not surprising, but that's still even in line with, where we've looked at just even our regular job seeker activity with the desktop for years. I mean, I think as recruiters, we all thought for years and years and years, because we were posting jobs in accordance to a newspaper deadline, and then we thought, people are really, ramping up their job search on Saturdays and Sundays, and that hasn't been the case. I don't know ever, but I know it hasn't been for years. Monday has always been one of the highest traffic days for jobs, and I think regardless of what your medium is, so that does not surprise me at all.
I did some fun research in April where we were looking at the number of people who mentioned their dissatisfaction or the fact that they hated their job on Twitter. And we looked at the different days, like what was the highest peak, and the highest time, like the time when you said that you hated your job, and was Sundays at 3 o'clock. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, in that, and likely they're probably saying that from their mobile device,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not necessarily looking for a job during the weekend. They're waiting until the workday or in the morning in front of their smartphones to actively look for work.
Yep.
Obviously, I'm a big fan of social media. You and I actually met in 2007 on one of the first social networking sites, myspace.com. But what do you think is the most important first step for a recruiting team who is sitting down and thinking about mobile? Is that social media, or is it something else?
It's something else. I mean, I think you've got to look at what it is that you're trying to accomplish with any type of technology or media that you're looking to use, but you also have to be able to say, what is it? With any strategy, with any technology, you can't just approach it with, I think we should do this. Where do we start? What you start with is, by not using this strategy or this technology, in this case, mobile and recruiting, are we missing the opportunity to reach and convert candidates? And then look at your individual situation as a company. In some companies, I don't know that right now with mobile, I mean, obviously when you look at the stats, I think everybody is missing that opportunity. But if, probably the biggest miss with people is if you're spending a lot of media dollars, if I'm spending a lot of advertising dollars to get in front of people, especially in online job postings, and then they're coming to my career site or my job postings and they're accessing those from a mobile device, if they can't see, search, or apply for my jobs once they hit my site or my job posting, then they're not going to stick around. And the chances of them coming back later from a desktop are very slim. So that's wasted money. So that right there is probably the biggest thing to think about when asking yourselves, should we look at mobile and recruiting? But to your question about, are they the same or are they separate? I've always kind of made the distinction between the two, that mobile on its face is, it's a device, it's your platform to kind of serve up the opportunity to post jobs on social or regular, or to view those jobs that are posted, or viewing your social media or doing your engagement. So, it's that device in the sense that a desktop, serves a purpose, but the mobile website, in its from its it's really more of a destination, right? So it's part of your destination strategy, whether it's your career site or that mobile responsive version of your career site, where social media really is an opportunity to not just brand your company, but also to engage with job seekers. You're not going to do a whole lot of that in any other mobile application unless you're building some kind of mobile application community. But we do have the opportunity with career sites and with social media to still care for that overall overarching brand, and what message are we presenting to job seekers. But I do think that they serve a very different purpose where social is really its biggest impact is to be able to build out that brand, help, have the conversation with job seekers, give them an opportunity for two-way conversation, and then, just, and also, of course, to be able to see what conversation is happening about your employment brand and to understand, are your employees saying that they hate their job at 3 o'clock on Sunday, or do you have, employee evangelists, and do you have people that are reaching out and really actively searching for your jobs, and how do you touch those folks? Mobile though ends up being more your destination, or it ends up being your source. So if you're doing your actual sourcing with it, doing the SMS campaigns, or creating an opportunity for people to search and find and apply for those jobs, it's really actually serving that functional purpose that, print ads or whatever served back in the day and the job postings have kind of been doing. It's just a natural evolution of what device are we accessing them on.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier, which was looking at your website statistics and activity to figure out how many people are visiting your website using a mobile device. How does one go about doing that? Because I feel like personally, when I have talked with practitioners out there, they're not really certain, where do I go to get that information?
Right. And, the easiest way to do that is just to sign up for Google Analytics. And that's, if you've never been out there before and haven't ever used it, it can be a little overwhelming at first. But, working with, um, the data there, and to get familiar with it and just see, you can see how many people are hitting your site on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, on an hourly basis. You can see where they're coming from. So, you can see if they're accessing it on a mobile device. You can see, maybe if which of your job postings are driving more. So maybe if you do have traditional job postings, or even if they're coming from Indeed, you should be able to see those referral sources. So it helps you be a little smarter in, okay, where do we spend our time and our resources in trying to make sure that we're getting in front of candidates? And if something's working, then hey, maybe we should do more of that.
That in my mind is the first step, is trying to understand where people are coming from. Interestingly enough, on blogging for jobs, most of our mobile and tablet activity is like you were talking about, like either in the early morning or in the evening. And I tend to think that recruiters and HR professionals that are coming to read the blog, they're sitting down, kind of resting a little bit. Maybe they're in front of the television after dinner, and they're going through social media or via their tablet or their iPhone or what have you, and catching up on what's on the blog.
Yeah. And, and kind of still talking through both of those things at the same time with social and mobile. I think probably the big takeaway too is to remember that how well you use these tools is a reflection of your brand. And so, if you jump on board and, and try to do all of these things all at once without having some kind of goal, or something that you're trying to accomplish with it, and having and being purposeful, you also risk doing more damage than not doing anything at all. So, in kind of thinking through that, how many of us have seen really bad career sites or even company sites and wondered, I wonder what it's like to work there, if that's the level or the quality of their work. And so you also want to make sure that you're, again, kind of caring for that brand equation and how you're using these tools. And if you're not prepared to really have at least know what you're trying to accomplish and to have some data around it, and to know that you're trying to get in front of the right people, then, that can sometimes backfire. So it's important to just be aware of those.
I want to just mention, for those of you that are unsure about Google Analytics, if you just go to bloggingforjobs.com and go to the search box and put in Google Analytics, we have a couple tutorials that kind of walk you through about how it's being used, what screenshots look like. But it is really a foundational piece of any type of recruiting strategy that involves your career site, if you're looking at desktop or mobile or whatever you're doing. But it just gives you an understanding of where people are going, how long they're spending, what keywords are leading to your site, so that you can begin building your strategy. One thing I'll also mention, and Carrie talked about branding, and I think it's so important to remember that when you put yourself out there, you are putting your brand out there for the world to see. And people are watching on social media, even if you only have 15 Twitter followers, or you only have 100 Facebook likes or something. People are looking and watching and monitoring your activities. And don't leave this really important piece of your recruitment strategy to a 22-year-old intern. And I will say that the number of phone calls that I have gotten from companies that are very, very large in the summer from an intern that has contacted me and said, Jessica, I really like this blog post that you wrote about internal social networks. I'm a junior at XYZ College, and my task for this summer internship program is to build a social network. Just know that all this information is being shared, and the reflection of your company is really important, even with something so very small.
And I'll kind of follow up with that. To my point about if you're going to do it, make sure you're doing it right. And it's one of my favorite sayings and has been for years. I used to have it on my whiteboard just as my little reminder, but it was, if you don't have time to do something right, when are you going to have time to do it over? And it is a lot more work when you have to start over, and many of us have, I think, learned that when we've put in maybe some, craptastic technology or something that just really didn't accomplish what we expected, and then we had to kind of go back and redo and then reevaluate our resources. But I'll use Samsung actually as a prime example. Though when I came on board there, one of the first things they asked me to do was start building out the social presence and the brand. Foundationally, surprisingly, they had a lot of challenges with their internal infrastructure. And, one of the conversations that we had was, we really need to make sure our foundation and our house is in order before we start going out and broadcasting all of this information and trying to build up brand. And then we drive people back to something that doesn't work well. So even a brand at the level of Samsung had some challenges there. So, keeping in mind that everything that I'm saying here is not meant to make anybody feel bad if you're not up to par, but also, you don't have to go out there and do it now, but you do need to be aware that it is part of something that you've got to pay attention to, and you've got to, but going back to that, where do you start? You ask, what are you trying to solve for? You identify all the possible ways in which mobile could be used in your strategy. Is it a website? Is it a landing page? Is it an SMS campaign? Whatever, and if none of those solutions work for you, you need to possibly look back and peel back and go, okay, then how come they won't work? And then what do we need to look at differently from an internal perspective to set ourselves up for success down the road?
I felt like this is a really good time when, if you're a leader, maybe you're the VP of talent or in a leadership position within the organization, sitting back and saying, look, I really need to bring in somebody who has been there, done this before, and can help guide us in the right direction, because we really only have one chance to make a first impression. And that's where they can bring in somebody like you as a consultant, or somebody to kind of help set things up and get that organization and that talent team going in the right direction.
Right, because especially in the smaller to mid-sized companies, but even in some of the larger companies, again, some of the bigger brands are not immune to this. But maybe you don't have the budget for a branding person to be on staff full time, or an HR technology person that has other priorities besides the ATS. You can look to, okay, find somebody in the industry that has some experience there, and look at what would it take in 30 to 60 days to maybe go out and audit, where are we, where do we want to be, and how do we get there?
Agreed. Well, let's switch over a little bit, because I want to talk about some other different things surrounding mobile. There's been a lot of talk about apps, and we've written about apps on Blogging for Jobs, and then mobile rendering of sites and engaging candidates through these traditional mobile channels like YouTube and Instagram. But how do you think people should prioritize all these different mobile activities? Is there like a secret sauce or strategy, or is it unique to each organization?
Yes. So I think you need to look at, again, what are you trying to accomplish? In Samsung's case, again, they had a visible enough consumer brand that we probably had a little more cushion in taking some time getting some stuff done. But on the flip side of that, they're a mobile company. They need to have a mobile presence, So when you look at what's specific to your industry, all of those things kind of come into play. But from a secret sauce perspective, there are some things that you just can't do until you've got other things done. So you can't really run an SMS campaign if you don't have cell phone numbers. So how are you getting those cell phone numbers? And if people opted in to get text messages from you, but even before that, what are you driving them to? Everything that you do and get a touch point with candidates needs to have some kind of engagement opportunity or call to action. So if I'm going to send candidates a text message, what's the content of that going to look like? And is it going to be, hey, we're hiring for a bunch of call center positions in Georgia. You said you were interested. Check out these jobs here. Well, where are you taking them to? If your website is not mobile optimized, then I can't really do an SMS campaign. Okay. But then in asking yourself those questions, okay, maybe my website isn't mobile optimized or mobile responsive, but maybe I could spend a couple of hundred to a couple of $1,000s to build out a landing page that's just for mobile campaigns, that's editable, and I can change that or whatever. And that one piece of real estate becomes the stepping stone or that first step to maybe, dipping your toe in the water of social. But the interesting thing about SMS campaigns is that like it's up to 99% of text messages are opened. Contrast that to email campaigns, which is 20 to 30% on average. And that's a very generic average because each industry has different, open rates. And then 90% of all text messages are read within 3 minutes. So when you look at, hey, is that a good way to get in front of candidates? It absolutely is. But you've got to be strategic in knowing, okay, what are all the steps that we need to have in place? Because you can't just go, okay, I want to go do an SMS text campaign and send everybody a message and then not have a strategy or purpose in where you're driving them to.
So just to give some background, if you don't know what SMS stands for, do you want to kind of walk us through that, Carrie?
Well, I honestly, I can't even remember off the top of my head what it stands for.
I think it's short messaging service.
Well done.
Yeah.
But it's text messaging.
It's basically the FTC has regulations around this, just like email subscriptions, so that you don't get a bunch of text messages from just random weirdos and people who obtain your number. They have to actually have you opt in before they start sending you a series of text messages. And according to the FTC, you're supposed to be able to opt out at any time. That's why when you sign up, like at the football game, text in, who the best OU football player is of 2014, it will say, text stop to end. They're in compliance with the FTC.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And amazingly, the regulations have helped so much more, have been so much more effective than with email, because I think we all, the world learned a lesson with that. And so like your spam rates with text messages are like less than 1%. It's part of the reason why they have such good open rates. People just want to, partly we're just clearing them off our phone too, right? We want to get through them all, but it's not like our email inbox that we can just let stuff sit and not deal with. So they're very, very heavy around that, but that means you have the opportunity to do a very targeted message, but you got to make sure you get it right.
Yeah, it can be done incorrectly. If you want to see an example of a campaign, if you just get on your phone and you can text HRCI to 55678, and it'll walk you through. It's just a 5-question test. It's like your SPHR, PHR test questions that I threw in there to just give you kind of an example of maybe what an SMS campaign could look like. And I talk about these things when I'm teaching and training HR and recruiting professionals, because the fact is that unions are leveraging SMS campaigns extremely well to engage your workers at your company potentially.
Yeah, and that's one really cool thing about SMS campaigns, to your point with that, is that you can do a survey. You can almost facilitate an entire automated conversation with someone, based on what their response is, that it triggers another auto response, and to help people, drive to, maybe you're attending an event, or maybe you are just doing a survey, or it's just there's so many different cool things that you can do with it, that gives you that kind of the feel for the two-way and engagement.
It is fun, I will just say. We'll move on to something here next, but I love this SMS text messaging personally, and I like to use it at conferences and events, and it's so interactive. Like we'll do maybe like a picture, like take a picture of you with your favorite drink or a new friend. And the number of responses that we get from HR professionals who are at a conference is extremely high. The engagement level is fantastic. And so imagine what it would be like for candidates who are actively looking for work or want to learn more about your company. If it's done targeted, it can be really effective.
Yep.
So let's move forward away from SMS and text messaging and talk about some examples of companies who are doing mobile recruitment the right way. Do you have any good case studies or examples that you'd like to share with our listeners here?
I'm always gonna pimp out AT&T because we did some really cool stuff, and I know that there are definitely some other companies that have done some really cool stuff. So Marriott has a really good platform. And I have a list of, because I kind of stay on top of this with people, but I don't have it off the top of my head. I think I know Sodexo's doing some stuff.
That's fine. We can put some examples on blogging for jobs there that you would recommend that people check out. I would say that if you're looking, check out their site from your mobile device as well as your desktop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so let's take a little bit of a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today's topic, if you just joined us a little bit late, is mobile recruiting with my guest, Carrie Corbin. One of the most recent reports on mobile comes from Indeed, which now reports that 50% of all web traffic happening on their website, their job aggregator site, is from a mobile device. And with the iPhone 6, pre-order sales in the first 24 hours topped over 4 million phones. Personally, I don't see this stopping. I have my order placed for my 6 Plus. I need a bigger phone so that I can read email and maybe do an ebook, because iPads aren't working for me. I just don't use my iPad as much as I should. And I see this trend of mobile not stopping, and listeners are likely planning right now their next year's recruiting strategy, maybe while they tune into the podcast. So, Carrie, I'll ask you, how important is mobile in your overall talent attraction strategy? Where do you rank it?
Where do I rank it? For me, I actually think it's probably more important than social. And I think it's more important than even some of your advertising media because it's your destination. So mobile and SEO are probably the two things that I place the most importance on, outside of your just traditional advertising. And by traditional, I mean interactive. But, when you look at, what some of the stats are, there is a lot of information available, but, Indeed, iMomentous, JobVite, Glassdoor, several companies have been really doing a lot of case study and data gathering in our space. And there's something like, I believe it was a Glassdoor survey. It said 9 in 10 job seekers expect to be searching for or have searched for a job on a mobile device. But your average stat is that around 45 to 50% of people say that they're actively searching for jobs on a mobile device. And like 45% report using their mobile specifically to search for jobs at least once a day. And, that's a big deal. And when you look at the Job Bite survey, this one I do have the top 5 career related activities that job seekers are likely to perform from a mobile device. 51% will search for jobs. 44% will save postings to apply later. So even if you don't have the ability to mobile apply, give people the ability to save the job or email it to themselves so that they can come back to it, create some kind of trigger. 44% get real-time alerts about job openings. 39% visit company career sites. And I do think that stat I think is probably who goes directly to the career site versus is directed there from a job posting. And then 37% read company reviews from employees. So that brand presence still important. That presence on Glassdoor, something you got to pay attention to.
It sounds like to me you've just made the priority list, like
Mm-hmm.
going based on the numbers. This is where we should focus our efforts. I want to go back just a second. You said mobile and SEO. Tell us a little bit about what SEO is and how that works in recruiting strategy.
So when you look at just your overall search engine marketing and search engine optimization, all of this starts to kind of bleed together a little bit as part of that greater strategy. But, if I build a career site and nobody can find it, whether it's mobile optimized or not, I want to make sure that when somebody goes to Google and they want to see AT&T jobs or Samsung jobs or whatever, that they can perform a Google search and find my content. My preference is for them to come directly to my career site so that I'm not having to pay a job board and to be the intermediary. Now, granted, there are some people or some companies like Indeed that just do such a good job. Part of the reason Indeed is so successful is because they pay attention to how they're using search engine optimization to ensure their stuff always comes up on every search because they've got every job. So being smart around, okay, what can I do to create the path of least resistance for the job seeker to get from my job posting or from expressing an interest to working for me to actually applying for a job. And the old internet rules still apply. People want to click as few times as possible. So what can I do to help facilitate that? That's probably SEO's biggest benefit. But you also have to be aware of that from a mobile perspective. And so, not to get too technical, but one of the reasons why you want to consider doing a mobile responsive website, which means that from any size screen, whether it's a desktop, a tablet, or a phone, I have the same website. It's just going to adjust for the screen size. That's really, if you haven't started yet, that's the path you need to go down, because Google has come out and said that mobile optimized sites, which are basically a duplicate of your desktop, and they have the M dot in front of the website name, are considered a duplicate link essentially, and Google is not going to index those websites in their searches anymore. So making sure that responsive is part of what your strategy is when you're looking at making your website mobile friendly is going to make a difference in your ability to be effective in SEO.
I will say that Harley Davidson has a nice mobile rendered site that you could check out, and even the Yellow Pages actually has a mobile rendered mobile site that you can see. If you have multiple devices in your household or amongst your recruitment team, I'll log on to the Harley Davidson site and you can see how they essentially look the same.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the creative ways that you have used mobile and when it comes to social media, and particularly with career fairs. Talk us through that, because I think that that's particularly interesting and extremely creative how at AT&T you leverage these things.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. In the early days of kind of developing mobile optimized career sites, no one really had the ability to apply via a mobile device, and we all kind of just accepted that as our reality. And we were actually one of the first companies to build out an iPhone app that we had that really served to be more of just a branding tool. And so, ultimately we killed that in favor of, building out the actual career site, because we saw that more traffic was hitting there and we didn't have to worry about having an app that was specific to a device. However, what we learned is that there are still some opportunities where a mobile app might still be more relevant. It's one of the things that we had done early on when we built out our new career site. We had created our talent network, and there's lots of talk around talent network, talent communities. This is not a talent community per se, because it's really more of a marketing database. It was just a quick data capture on our website that said, hey, if you don't see a job that you're ready to apply for now, just give us your basic contact information, name, email, that cell phone number, just your area, your geographic area, city and state, and then your career area of interest. And based on that, we basically built our own kind of sourcing database that we could then execute those mobile campaigns or email campaigns. So that became a good, kind of lead generation for us. But what we started doing is using that talent network at our career fairs. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that is because we wanted to minimize our use of collateral. Print it's expensive. Two, it's not really very effective. Three, it's hard to track your ROI. So it's just, there's not really a good value prop with that anymore. But we also wanted to just reduce our kind of carbon footprint to an understanding our college audience. And we wanted to be able to use mobile technology to kind of showcase our brand. So there was a big push, big reason for us to do that from a value prop perspective. So we looked to our talent network as a way to capture that job seeker information at career fairs via a tablet. But we were challenged with network activity, because anybody that's ever been in a big conference hall or career fair knows that being able to get cell phone service isn't always the easiest thing to do. So we built an app. And the beautiful thing with the Talent Network app is that it allowed us to work offline, but it also gave us the ability to capture the specific job fair and recruiter that could be tied to both the candidate and that event. So it gave us the opportunity to get some ROI around particular career events, because how many of us have ever been able to say, yes, definitively, I managed to secure 20% of my hires from career fairs last year. I don't know anybody that's ever really been able to say that effectively, but we could do it this way because we had, we knew we could actually set the app up to say it's specific to this, Nishimba event, and this recruiter was there, and then they secured this many applicants, and then we followed up with them after the event. Those people applied, ultimately were hired. Bam, we've got some ROI, and we also minimized that rogue hiring managers taking resumes, or recruiters even, taking resumes at career fairs. And it became a very effective tool for us. And then again, that also was just another way for us to continue to build up that talent network pool of warm candidates. And then that sourcing pool actually became one of our top 5 sources of hires in almost every career category because we had people that had already expressed an interest in working for us.
And they were a really interactive group. I mean, I remember you telling me that you guys were doing surveys and asking them for information, and the response rate that you were getting from these members of the talent network was extremely large, which is very rare.
Yeah, it was, but we did a lot to keep them engaged though too. So again, keeping in mind it wasn't really the community piece that was two-way engagement. We incentivized them to stick around by just making them always eligible for a monthly prize drawing, and it didn't have to be expensive. It just needed to be cool, make it sexy and people are interested. Um, so we did usually some kind of cool technology or electronics or something, just being that we were in that industry. And then we did a monthly newsletter, and we called out the winner of the last month's prize. So it was, hey, we're going to make you famous for a little bit. And we gave them some company news and information. And then we also gave them some hot jobs. And those links through those hot jobs were where we got some significant, application and hire activity, but to the point about the surveys, one of the early things we did was we sent out a survey and said, hey, how often do you want to hear from us? What types of content is valuable to you? And what can we do better to make sure that we're getting you information that's interesting? And, from that, we were able to adjust what we were doing to make sure that we were meeting the needs of our audience.
I think for me, like what you've just said, this portion is the most important piece of our entire discussion, which number one is find, if you have available, an existing group of candidates and ask them what they want from you as an employer first before you do anything else. And then from there, build out your strategy, and they're involved. It's just like employees. When they provide insights, they're more vested, they're more engaged, and you have better results.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. I get excited about it because it's just, so we do a survey every year, Blogging for Jobs, for our readers. And it's something that is not, I like to do it, and it's because of my HR background. We even have a little infographic we send to people when they say, what's your percentage of readership? But those kind of things are important because it helps us determine what kinds of topics to be discussing, what types of content to be sharing, and then how often we engage. And I also, out of our survey, just as a side note, the average person that reads our blog has shared with us that they are being contacted by vendors 8 to 15 times a week. That's a lot of activity from not just a single vendor, but 8 to 15 different vendors. So those kind of questions are really important to develop a strategy from.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I'll add to that is that, we tend to, in management and leadership, in HR and companies, we all suffer from thinking that we know. Regardless of what it is that we think we know, we all think we know, right? And so a lot of times our decision making is based on backing into something that we think we already have the answer to. And I say that because, when we're building out an EVP internally in a company, for example, we might think we know why our employees want to work for us. But that's part of the reason we do surveys, is to ask them. And and the same rules apply to any other external audience. You might be surprised at what they come back and say is important to them. And so it is important to ask the questions, be sincere, and expect to take action and do something different if the answers come back that are different than what you expect.
That's the key there, like actually taking action from the feedback that you've received.
Right.
Oh, any type of bold predictions you're seeing or you want to share for us where mobile recruitment is heading?
Yeah, and I'm going to go out on a limb on this one. I usually try to stay a little conservative, even when I get asked to be bold. But the biggest challenge with mobile recruiting right now is the actual applicant tracking systems. Back to the point of SEO, most of your applicant tracking systems, they're not search engine optimized. Your URLs for your job descriptions are very, very long. They're not searchable online. So no job seeker is going to type in whatever your job title is and expect to find a Taleo job posting. That's common with a lot of the ATS technology. Same thing with mobile. The application process is so convoluted and so cumbersome that it's very hard, for a lot of companies that we're having to spend the extra money on top of, an ATS to then work around them to build a mobile overlay essentially to allow people to apply using that application. And so I guess kind of my bold prediction is just that if ATS technology doesn't get up to speed quickly, I do feel very strongly, because it is already happening, but I think it'll be probably much more disruptive over the next few years. The newer, more agile systems that do care for mobile and mobile SEO, I think are going to be the ones that are going to rise to the top of the premier providers.
And that's going to be hard, right? Because if you've worked with a legacy system like an Oracle or ADP for a really long time and they aren't adapting, you're making a big change to switch, but it's going to benefit you in the long run because it's mobile optimized and able to handle a number of candidates from a mobile device.
Right. And at the end of the day, the dollars lost in advertising and candidates that hit my site and never apply or get hired, to me, that's your business case justification, and dollars spent elsewhere to try to develop that technology so that you do make sure that those ad dollars aren't wasted.
So measuring the number of, maybe if you have a high bounce rate, or your percentage of candidates not completing the application is really high, those are things to consider, especially if they're using a mobile device to actually complete the application.
Right.
Well, good things to know and especially getting that Google Analytics report will be able to help you to see these things and have these conversations with your leadership team. I want to thank Carrie for taking the time today to talk with us on the Workology podcast. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
The easiest way to find me is to go to my about.me page, and it's just about.me/Carrie Corbin. And I have just made a change to my Twitter handle, so it is now at the Carrie Corbin. Or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can use my email. It's carriecorbin.mba, as in Mary Boy Apple, @gmail.com.
Oh, wow. Our first email address during the podcast. But Carrie's very responsive. So she is a Twitter. She's in the Twitterati. So she'll respond to your Twitters, and she likes to share good information and stuff there. She's also a very supportive OU fan. So I'm looking forward to maybe tailgating with you here in the next week or so in Dallas for the OU Texas game.
Me too. So excited.
I know. It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's my daughter's first OU Texas, so we're looking forward to that. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us on the Workology podcast, hosted by me, Jessica Miller Merrill, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace HR and recruitment. Until next time, you can visit bloggingforjobs.com to listen to all our episodes of Workology. Thanks for joining us, guys. Have a great day.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller Merrill, provided by Total Picture Media.